they teach you is that whenever you take courses and put them online, or do correspondence courses or video-based courses, one of the things that happens is that there's a disconnect between the faculty and students. There's almost like a coldness because of the technology getting in the way of that separation. So we have to be mindful whenever we design online courses and work towards building that community inside those courses, so we don't lose out what is a very important part of the learning experience. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Spiegelman from the School of Business Administration.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? All right, so I called my talk today, Engaging Students in an Online Format, 10 Tips for Challenging and Stimulating Students When You Can't Throw an Eraser at Them. All right, so it is a different type of experience when you teach online than when you teach in the classroom. And I'm going to tell you a few things. I want to tell you a couple things about myself. I'm not going to go into my whole background, but this is the first course that I'm teaching for the university online. I'm teaching in the Executive MBA program. I teach the Economic Fundamentals component of the Executive MBA for the Americas, which is aimed generally towards Latin American individuals, but not exclusively. But also I taught at the University of North Carolina in their online MBA program at the Keenan Flagler School. So I've had some experiences before this, and it definitely helps. It's a learning by doing type thing. And I will say that the online MBA program at University of North Carolina is an excellent program. So I learned a lot when I did that. I also think we have an excellent program. And anyways, I want to give you some ideas just to think about. I don't consider myself an expert in online teaching. I've not been doing it a few years, but not an extremely long period of time. But I want to give you some ideas, and it's just the things to think about when you're working in an online format. So the first one is use visuals. So the students, it's not real interesting, unless you're, I guess George Clooney or Scarlett Johansson. You're not extremely interesting for them to look at for an hour at a time, and or you're doing something that might get you fired. You don't want to do that. But so using visuals is important. So organize what you're going to do ahead of time. Generally a PowerPoint or some other type document is useful. And I believe that a picture tells 1,000 words, so having graphs or charts or pictures is useful. Also, don't write a million things on a piece of paper and expect them to digest it. So, I don't think, a lot of faculty probably doesn't really go through training, and unfortunately, teaching training the way maybe we should. Maybe we should have that Center for Teaching Excellence. But, I actually, even though I have a PhD in economics, I spent most of my career outside in business. And one of the valuable experiences I had, I worked with people from the McKinsey consulting firm. So that helped me a lot learn how to create documents and engage people. So use visuals, be brief. So use dash points. Don't write full sentences. Don't write a lot of things on a page. Maybe 3 to 5 dash points is a good way to do it. And the worst thing is reading to students. Do not read to students. They can read. If you want them to read something, put it in course documents. So so you wanted something to talk about. Use a visual. Number 2, be expressive, all right? And there is an element of acting in teaching. And some people are aware of that and some people aren't. But if you speak in a monotone, if you don't use expressions, you don't use gestures, you don't modulate your voice, people get bored. And if they get bored in a classroom, they'll get bored faster in an electronic environment. And not only that, they can turn you off. So it's much easier to leave in an electronic environment than it is in a classroom. Usually they won't get up and walk out. It's happened to me before, but usually they don't get up and walk out on you. So, try to be expressive. Go for it. Be a little bit over the top. That helps. Show examples. Now, one thing that I teach in the business school primarily. I try to draw on my experience outside, and I always see that students light up a little bit when you're talking about something from the quote-unquote real world. And so if you can use examples, give them something that they can relate to. Right now I'm working a lot with Latin American students. So if I can talk about what's happening in their economy, they become engaged. You hear more response from them. So you want to make things relevant. You do have to work at it. I will say you have to work at it harder in an online environment than you do in a regular classroom. So, but this is a technique you can use to engage students, and it works. Ask questions. That's another thing. Maybe people are going to sleep on you. Let them know that Big Brother is watching. So see if they're there. Ask them questions from time to time. So if they're not there, you got to find out why. They don't understand what you're saying. Are they really, are they tired, whatever. So, you can't always get the answer why, but you can try to keep them engaged, so make sure you're getting feedback if they're not providing it to you. Another technique is to let them lead, put them on the spot. If you're not getting a lot of interaction, you can call on them. You could let them be the moderator. And so if they know that you may do this, they'll be a little bit more on their toes. They'll be a little bit more. They'll keep up to speed with what you're doing, because it's sort of like the Socratic method in law school. You can't really sit back and coast when the professor might call on you. Snuff out distraction. Now this is another one. So the students will sometimes start chatting on you, and so you've got to try to be aware of what they're doing, and let them know that you're not going to allow that. You're together a short amount of time. One of the things about the electronic environment that's efficient. Actually, by the way, I'm going to have some questions at the end, but if you have questions or you want to say anything, please jump in. But it's important to try to be aware. You can also go into your zone. It's easy to do. You're just going through your presentation, and you're not really paying attention. Kids are much better at multitasking than we. Now, there's some probably younger people than me here, but they know how to multitask. So they'll half listen to you and go through the thing. So you got to multitask too. You're going through your presentation. You need to be aware of what they're doing. If they're leaving the room, you got to call them out on that. So you can see that when they turn off their computer. Or if you're, again, going back to using the Socratic method, that might be a way of doing it. All right, identify problem areas. It's important to be interactive. So what we've done in the business school, and actually this was used in the North Carolina MBA program, we have a lot of online content, and where they can look at the lecture, quote unquote lectures, when they want to. So they're already coming to class with some knowledge. Try to use, that's one advantage that you have in this online environment, that you can focus more on problem areas. Where do they need help? What do they find difficult? So, it depends a little bit on how you've set up the program, how much you've given them in advance. But try to, you can speed through, the easier things, but you may want to focus and work on the problem areas. Now also, another thing that I'll mention here is most courses usually have some kind of either course presentation where you're presenting material from the course, and then office hours. And so ideally, I think ideally you want the course presentations to be a little bit like office hours too. You want them to be interactive. If you're just going through your PowerPoint and not getting anything else. But so you need to work on the problem areas. You know, if there are things that really need more work, they can identify that to you, and you can do that during office hours. So it's important also, you know, when I'm on this topic, to make sure the students feel comfortable contacting you. Make yourself accessible to students. You know, that's really key, I think, to the success of our EMBA program. We want people to have a good experience. We want them to tell people that they were satisfied with the program and they thought it was excellent. So you need to be interactive with the students. You need to let them know that they can contact you. You need to give them the best ways of doing it. You don't necessarily want them to call you at 4 in the morning, but you want them to be able to access you, and you want them to feel that they're comfortable in doing that. So, and you know, it really helps you to get feedback from the students, you know, in terms of having a better class environment. So make sure you let them know how they should contact you. It's a good idea if they can give you a heads up. If you're having office hours, you know, it's good if they'll tell you what they need work on. So this is, I think, an important area. All right, I better move ahead. I got to keep it moving, right? As a matter of fact, I have a class I've got to teach, so I've got to keep things moving. But you know, if you can, you know, try to keep from. I guess one of my faults as a teacher, I sometimes go off on tangents, and my kids will tell you this, and probably my wife as well. But you know, so you can't, you know, go. There's a shorter attention span for online format. You know, you just have to be aware of that. So if you belabor things or you go off on tangents, you know, it's very easy for them to go into their own little world. So try to keep things moving, pace yourself, try to be aware that you're not you know, beating a dead horse. That's not too entertaining. You have to be entertaining. You have to be a little bit entertaining. All right, which brings me to my next point. Be provocative. All right, you know, that it's more. I try to do this in my regular class environment too. I try to challenge them. You know, now you want to keep your job. You know, so I try to keep my jokes PG-13 or better. That's supposed to be a joke. Anyways, but the. But be provocative, you know. So you know, I always, you know, try to make extreme statements. You know, I teach on something called price discriminating monopoly. So I say my first statement: Walt Disney discriminates. I'm accusing the Walt Disney, and I do. I accuse the Walt Disney Company of discrimination. Anybody know what kind? Do you guys know what kind of discrimination does Walt Disney Company engage in? Is it? Age discrimination? You can't get into a Walt Disney if you're too old? No, they want everybody. No, they discriminate. I like the kind of discrimination they engage in. They discriminate in favor of Florida residents. All right, so everybody's thinking maybe it's sex discrimination, gender, you know, et cetera. But they engage in geographic discrimination. All right, if you try to get in their you get a discount for Florida residents. So it wakes them up a little bit, you know. Be provocative, but keep your job. All right, and I'm going to stop at this point. Always leave them wanting more. That's my last slide. You know, so it's you've got to, you know, it's, I think, short and sweet in general. You know, maybe in office hours you can go into more detail. You need to be a little bit kind of move. You know, so again, you don't want to go so fast they can't understand what you're saying, but you need to try to make it entertaining. You need to think about that even more than the regular classroom. In the regular classroom, they're trapped. Here, they really aren't, and it's very easy for you to lose them. So I hope I didn't lose you, and will answer any of your questions at this time that you may have. You know, if I can answer them. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. You mentioned about the shorter attention span in online formats. Do you have a recommendation in how long lectures should be when you put lectures online?
Lectures online? Well, if you post the, well, there's two. Again, let's distinguish between, you know, at North Carolina they called it the asynchronous material, which is the synchronous materials where everybody does the same thing at the same time. So, so many classes you'll post lectures, you know, and I think that can be very effective actually when you know, when you do that. So that way the student can watch that when they want to, and then you don't have to worry so much about attention span for that part. And then usually you have a synchronous component. That's what you call the the lecture, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know if I've found, at least the 2 times I've done it, they've usually been an hour long. So I would say 50 minutes to an hour. So you could shorten it up, which you'd probably get more attention, but it's difficult, even though there's some transaction cost for the students, right? They have to get to their computer, they have to be in a certain location where they can focus. So I wouldn't probably make it too much shorter than that. But because you want it to be, one of the reasons we do distance learning, we do these things is because we want to be time efficient. So I think an hour is a good amount of time. It would be very hard to hold people's attention for 2 or 3 hours. So I think 50 minutes to an hour is a good time segment.
So
And
the
then,
format you were talking, online format, it's like students log in and they all watch the lectures at the same time. This is the part that wasn't clear to me when you started.
yes,
Okay.
so that's,
As opposed to posting lectures and letting them see.
well, we again, you could again, there's some, it depends on your program. Now, if you're designing the whole class, you may have some freedom to do that. If you're part of, I'm part of a curriculum which has been designed, I'm playing a role within that. So other people have thought out the structure. I didn't really determine the structure. So, but it turns out in both the EMBA and in the North Carolina MBA, they've had pretty much the same structure where you do have recorded course material. And I think that structure works. I think that's what we were discussing at our table today, that one advantage of the online format is you can sort of present the material that they need to learn, in a lecture type format. That's really nice to post it online, let them look at it at their leisure. And then when you meet with the students, I'm thinking I may do a flipped classroom where I do more of the lecturing online, and then I could have discussion sections. We can really get into it. Sometimes in a class, you have people asking, either we have nobody asking questions, or you have one kid asking millions of questions and taking you, and you can't, sometimes I feel bad not answering that student. But if you kind of have everybody going through the lecture, then you might be able to set up your classroom where you have discussion sections where you're able to go much deeper. So, as I say, a lot of us, I'd be willing to bet a lot of people in this room feel a lot of trepidation about online teaching. And, we can like it or we not like it, but it's coming, whether you like it or not. So I think it's smart for everybody to at least have some exposure to it, because, I'm not sure that the classroom's going away. I don't believe that. But there's definitely going to be different modes of teaching coming forward. So like it or not, here it comes. And it really behooves people in the education field I think, to gain some knowledge and ability. And, so it does, there's some things that are worse about it. There's some things that are better. It is harder to get an emotional connection to the student through online. It's harder. So you got to work at it, but on the other hand, there are things that are good about it. It's time efficient. It may allow you to change the way, if you're not doing complete distance learning, it may allow you to focus on things in discussion sections. So, and even though I can share my experience with you, it's going to probably be different for everybody out here. So you will learn as you go through it what's good and what's bad. But if you look at it in a positive way, I think you're going to have a better experience than you look at, I have to do this or I don't want to do this. So there are, that's just my advice to you, is that it is coming in some way. It may not affect everybody in the same way, but I'm pretty sure 10, 15 years from now, the way that we teach is going to be drastically different than how we teach now. And pretty much, probably in every classroom. Any other questions?
I just had a comment, something to add on to that. I think whenever you decide to get into teaching online, it depends on the model and how much production you put into it. Sometimes you can take a great lecture that covers an hour and it's 3 different topics and cut that down into very efficient 5-minute chunks with some additional reading materials around it. I think that chunking can actually help because you can embed activities in between them. Because right now, whenever I'm talking, I'm doing micro engagement with you, so I can see head nods right there, right? So I'm getting feedback constantly, which you can do even if you do a live Collaborate session. You get that feedback. Is there any questions? Somebody types in a question. Oh, okay, I forgot to mention this rule about fiscal responsibility. So it really depends. I've seen successful, really engaging TED Talks that are basically lectures with great slides. They can be 45 minutes easily. They can be completely engaging. I've also seen people lose an audience in the first 5 minutes because of some of the things you said. They haven't varied their tone or anything else. So I would just say work with somebody who's done it before, or find a colleague and see if your approach will work. But do that early in the process so you don't waste a lot of time on a format that turns out not to work.
I got a question for you. Is chunking a technical term? No, Lily, who's going away to Panama, which we're even though we have right next to her is David Lewis, who's seems to be extremely competent. I've just met him recently, and so I think he's going to do a great job. But all of us in the Executive MBA program got very connected. Lily's done a phenomenal job as our sort of technical person within the Executive MBA program. But she uses that term chunking. Where did you get that from? Did they teach you that? It's chunking.
It's a commonly used term I think you said psychology. In instructional design, it's used a lot. Part of it comes from that joke, like, how do you eat an elephant?
Right.
One bite at a time.
One bite.
Yeah. So
Right.
It's that you learn, you hear something, you do something with it. You see something, you do something with
Right.
it. You hear something else, you discuss it with somebody. So it's constantly getting back to that active learning. So you can get 7-minute
Right.
chunks or 10-minute chunks
Right.
and still absorb it all.
Right. Well, I agree with that basic idea. I didn't know there was a technical name for it. Now I do. But yeah. But when you have on the online lecture part, we definitely chunked it. That was Lily's term. So we have this topic and then the next topic, and it gives a pause, and it probably is easier for the student to digest. And then if you have one seamless lecture online, you probably lose a lot more students. So even so I think there's some usefulness to that. And that's also probably, I could have put a slide in there, put chunks in your lecture. But that's the way, divide it up. It goes to some of the other things I was talking about. Keep it moving, keep it interesting. If you keep to one topic, it'll probably bore them. Yes?
I think you were touching on this as I came in a little late. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the way in which one acts when one teaches, which is true, right? When we're all on stage, when we're walking into a classroom, and the extent to which that's even more necessary in an online environment, perhaps even to the detriment of what we feel is our own personality or our teaching persona. I mean, how much do we really need to put on even more of a performance than we do in a regular classroom?
Right. Well, I actually think it's a good idea to remind yourself. I would say try to be over the top. And when I was recording the video, so I try to do that a little bit in my class. I have this graph of the long-run competitive equilibrium. I call it the point of beauty. We're all attracted to beauty. I talk about how the fall of communism can be explained in the Soviet Union because of this graph. I talk about how China is growing at 12%. I'm not going to go into all that with you. But when I was recording this in the studio, he kept saying, give it a little bit more, give it a little bit more. And that's what I would say to you, give it a little bit more. And probably I could remind myself, to be honest with you, when I'm online, because now I'm trying to turn it up a little bit for this presentation, but bring that energy to class. I should probably try to, that's a good thing to remind yourself, because you can't really, I don't think you can err on the side of being too entertaining, so you don't want to be clownish, but I think most of us tend to fall in understated, and that will lead to boredom and students who turn you off and lack of attention. So I would say try to turn it up, almost regardless. I guess you can look for feedback if you think you're getting off track or people are laughing so much that they can't pay attention. I don't know. But try to use humor if you can, you know, and but I would say, try, you know, I think I'll bet you if you looked at 9 or 10 recordings, you would say, well, this person could have done more, you know.
Right.
And
but that's my question really is because I think many of us, myself included, find it difficult to do more.
right, you know what?
And then it feels very forced. You know, to what extent are you going to?
I say try it, you'll like it. You know, maybe have a glass of wine before you teach. No, you know what? I used to be. I remember. What's that? What? As a matter of fact, I had one before I got here. No, just kidding. I tell you, when I was in college, you know, freshman, sophomore year, I was a pretty shy person. And I ended up taking a year off and bumming around Europe, and it forced me to not be shy. But I've had conversations with students, and I actually think, I'll tell you, Olivia's here, I'll tell you some of my ideas for the business school. You know, we should teach communications. You know, we do teach it to some extent, but my pet peeves are we should teach communication skills. I even think we should teach personality. Personality is important in life. And you know, some people prefer, they're quiet, they're introverted, and if you're going into a profession where you're very technically proficient, then you probably can achieve all your objectives, it's not going to hold you back. But I would say 90% of professions, that it helps to have some kind of personality. And I think it can be learned. I don't think it's something that we can't teach. And I think it's something we should teach. I really do. I think we should teach communication skills. I think we should teach business etiquette. I think we should teach networking is incredibly important in the real world. I think the business school should have a class in networking. You know, if I was dean of the business school, I would do. I'm not dean, so I can talk to people. But I will tell you, you know, in teaching, it helps to be expressive. You know, so just give it a shot. You know, you might enjoy it. You know, I'll tell you, I look at a little bit, especially I enjoyed doing the taping. It was a performance. You know, I'm not a natural performer, to be honest with you. I was in children's theater when I was a kid. I was the shy kid who got nervous, you know. So, but I've learned over time that it helps with your teaching if you can do these things, you know. So to me, I'm passionate about teaching. I'm here because I want to be a teacher. You know, I'm not I got my PhD. I went into business because I didn't want to do research. So I love teaching. And, so I'm always trying to give my best no matter what I'm doing, you know, because the students sense that, you know, and so give it your best shot. You'll be surprised what you can achieve if you try it. Yes. One more question, okay.
I think it's a quick one. It seems like a lot of the advice you gave would be much more difficult to do in an entirely asynchronous class. If you can't check if they're there, check if they're following. Like, how would you do a class?
You can. No, you can, in an asynchronous, you can check if they're there. You basically, actually in North Carolina, this is something we may want to do at some point, is the monitor how much time you spend reading the lecture material. You can do that, you know, with modern technology. And as a matter of fact, probably a good idea.
And the Socratic method and it just seemed, it was hard for me to imagine how to do that on an entirely, they do it whenever they want to kind of platform, as opposed to a group meeting space.
No, you have different formats. In the online class, usually, you have different formats, you know, so that's what you have to divide your class up, and usually there's an asynchronous component. That's the part that they do on their own. You know, that's where you have taped lectures or you have materials that they can look at. They do.
The whole class is asynchronous? If there's no like time where
No, that part of it, only that part is asynchronous. They're supposed to read it at certain times.
But some of the classes are entirely asynchronous, right? Like she teaches a class where there is no.
All right, well that's a different challenge, you know. So yeah, you can. I don't see how you can use Socratic method if the entire class is. You won't be able to do that, you know.
It seems even more challenging, more difficult.
All right, well, you know, all right, that's an area. I really haven't tried to teach that type of class, so I haven't been presented with that kind of challenge. But I would say, you know, then it's even more imperative that the materials that you present have to be great. You know, you have to try to put a lot of work into the asynchronous materials, so you don't, if that's all you have, that's all you have.
The Socratic dialogue, you can engage it via discussion.
Or, yeah, I was going to bring that up too. Discussion, right. Discussion posts, that you can, as a matter of fact, we do that also. That's a good idea. I should have mentioned that. Discussion posts. So you can see if the students, I ask the students on each topic to write something just to indicate either a question that they may have or to kind of go through what we've been doing so we can see that they're engaged and that they're getting the topic. So that's a good way to, that's excellent. In an asynchronous class, then you need to engage more through email, through discussion posts, and probably discussion posts is the best way to do it, and the class can all see it.
And also remember how you created those trigger questions that were very provocative, and at the same time it engages all students, introverted, extroverted, everybody has a voice, and that's a great advantage that you would have in contrast with on a face-to-face class. That you usually hear the extroverted kid or the one who read everything, and in this case, since it's mandatory that they all have one original postings plus 2 contributions to their classmates' postings, that you hear their voices and you engage into a conversation there. That's something that is very engaging too, very powerful.
Well, I think at this point I'll say thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Feel free to contact me if you want to talk about these things. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a few closing remarks. The time that I have for this is about 15 minutes, but I think I'll take about 3. So you can get back to food. And the other thing that I wanted to focus on is that when Hannah and I have done events like this, one of the things that people value the most is the time to just meet people that they hardly ever see, or just take that special time out of their day to connect to someone that they wouldn't normally meet. Bill has been mentioned a bunch of times. Somebody said, oh yeah, I've seen Bill before. I know who he is, and I made that connection a long time ago. Bill is a great resource for a lot of the technologies we've talked about today. If you need any help with any of the techniques, there's Bill. Red shirt, can't miss him. If you need any help with any of the techniques, certainly you can reach out to me and my group, and we're happy to help, or point you to the right person. So one of the things that we're really working on in my group, we're really embracing the direct values, the culture shaping initiative that's happening across the university. We don't want the Miami shuffle to happen whenever you try to do something new with technology. So if it's not our group and it's the library, we'll do a handoff to the library. Dacia Simpson's here. She runs the general purpose classrooms. If it's a classroom technology issue that she handles, we'll do a handoff to the classroom technology group. And we'll make sure that you get to the right place. But we expect them to do the same for us, and they do. So that's how we all, work together to build a better you. That's kind of the point. We're trying to break down silos. So again, just because I report to IT doesn't mean that I can't reach out to the libraries for something else, and vice versa. The university has recently made a very significant investment in the development of these kind of tools with the hiring of Kelly, with me. I've hired several new positions, instructional designers that have never existed before, and then we're able to fill in the rest of what Bill is trying to do on his own with a skeleton crew, and we're able to really move the university forward in this mission. The other thing is, when you work with us, we're a bit experimental. So we're willing to do things like the Kaltura streaming that we're trying today. It may work, it may not work, but we'll try to provide a safety net for you and help you if you want to be experimental. The other thing that we're working on is the design of learning spaces across campus. The university physically needs to transform in order to accommodate the new types of teaching techniques that we expect in classrooms. So if it's set up to be an auditorium where somebody's in the front and people are in bolted down chairs all facing one direction, that's not very good for collaboration. So either we can add some technology to that, or if that room needs to be refreshed at some point, we can work on redesigning that space with the appropriate partners, of course. The last thing I'll say is that you have questions that somebody in this room can answer. You have answers to somebody else's questions in this room. So that's why I wanted to bring everybody together today. I'm really hoping that this can be the first of an annual event that happens, until I retire and continues on afterwards. But I do want to thank you all for spending so much time today and trusting us enough to spend your time this way, because I know your time is very valuable. Thank you. We have the room until 3. There's plenty of food left. There's the technology demonstration areas over here. Feel free to hang out, to talk, to come up and